reports and diagrams in Spider Project. Spider Project has a number of built-in reports and diagrams, easy to customize and save as templates. If you go to the main menu, reports and diagrams, this is where you can find them. Let's have a quick look at the general reports and diagrams. And I'm going to pick the diagram as a format. And in this form, the diagram form, we can set up the parameters for the reports. For our example, I'm going to use the contract cost as a parameter, and I'm going to pick the expenses from the cost centers. So for the selected parameters, contract cost and expenses, I think we're happy with all the settings on this tab, including the cumulative calculation for these parameters. And now I'd like to move to the next step, data settings. You could either use the forward button or just select that area from the left-hand side menu. And for the diagram name, I think we want to call it something like contract cost versus expenses. For the period settings, I think we wanted to set up these parameters values by days. And for the rest, I think we'll just keep the rest of the settings as is. And if we move to the next tab for the diagram settings, this is where we can adjust the diagram height. And we could also adjust some color coding. So for example, for the contract cost, I'm going to pick another color, maybe green. And for the expenses, let's leave it as is. So I think in general, we're happy with the settings. And if I click OK, I can see the diagram just here below my activity Gantt chart view. If this diagram for the contract cost and expenses looks a little bit too small, we could go back to the parameters tab, back to the data settings, or I think should say diagram settings, and this is where we could adjust the diagram height, and the scale will automatically get adjusted. Let's pick a resource graph as another example for reporting. Go back to the reports and diagrams, general reports and diagrams, same area, diagrams. And I'm going to remove the contract cost and expenses as parameters from this view for now. And I'm going to select the resources. From the resources list, I'm going to select workers, because I wanted to create a graph that would show us the workers' quantities. And for this particular parameter, we don't need it to be cumulative. So I think for the rest of the diagram settings, I think we could keep it as is. And now what we can see is that there's another diagram called workers' quantity just above the contract cost and expenses diagram here. And it's all aligned to the activity Gantt view scale. And by using the scale bar, you can adjust the scale of the timeline by increasing that or decreasing that, and you can adjust the scale of the timeline and the scale of the reports. We go back to the reports and diagrams main menu, general reports and diagrams, table report. We're going to the same area for the reporting parameter selection, and for this time I'm going to select materials that we are consuming in our project, and I'm going to select all the materials, bring them to the parameters selection area, and I'm going to leave them as cumulative. And for the next step, for the reporting name, we're going to call that materials consumption. I wanted to see the top level objects only, so the consumption and the total for the object for each material. And in this area for the rows and column settings, we do want to see the total column. For the rows, I think we want to see the objects and parameters in the rows and the dates in the columns. I think we're happy with all the other parameter settings. Click OK. and Spider Project populates a table for all of the materials consumed within our project. We could actually export this table to Excel if we like. Another useful report in the table view would relate to the costs of the project. So I'm going to remove all these materials from the parameter selection, and I'm going to pick all the cost components for our report this time. And also from the cost centers is the expenses as a total cost of the project. We'll leave it as a cumulative a parameter. And for the data, let's call it cost analysis. We do want to have all these parameter selectors selected, and maybe just accept the total column because it's all cumulative this time. And if we look at the column now, we are going to look at the whole cost of the project in a table view. So if we go back to the activity Gantt view, another useful feature here is that we could add all these reports to the dashboard. In Spider Project, there is a dashboard reporting area function. At the moment, it's all blank, but if we populate a number of pages here, and at the moment, all these areas will be empty because we don't have any reporting set up here. But if we go back to the activity Gantt view and right-click on the diagram that we populated and put it place it to the dashboard and go back to the dashboard area, you can see that this diagram has been added to the page of the dashboard. And we have contract costs and expenses sitting in page 2. And for page 3, we could select workers quantity or the resource graph. And if we also place it to the dashboard and go back to the dashboard area, we have this report sitting on a separate page. By the way, you could adjust the parameters of the diagram directly from the dashboard. Just right-click on the diagram and go to the parameters area. Here, where you can adjust all of the parameters that we have set up before, and even more, you can save this report or a diagram as the template. So next time you don't have to think about all the settings. All of those will be already pre-selected and set up, and you could adjust them as required.